Read your legal documents, kids. I get 20-page contracts for the most simple sponsorships, and I am printing them out, highlighting, taking notes, underlining. If I don't understand something, I'm Googling. Is there fine print? I'm pulling out my magnifying glass. That's why they call it fine print, because I'm gonna find it. Hey guys, it's Nicole. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. I post book and music, mostly Taylor Swift related content. Today I'm going to be sharing my perspective and opinions on the Taylor Swift Big Machine record label feud that's been going on for a few years now. This is not going to be like a basic explanatory video, as other people have done those before, and Taylor herself also I think has explained it really well. If you don't really know what's going on, I highly recommend you go check out pretty much any public statement Taylor's put out about this, and also Jasmine Zaid's video on this. I'll link it up here. Go find out the basic info and then come back and watch this video. Okay, so I hold a Bachelor of Science in Music Industry. I've also been writing and performing my own original songs since I was 11 years old. So I'm definitely the type of person who can see like both sides of this issue as someone into both the creative and business sides. The first time Taylor spoke about this issue of her masters being sold was in 2019, which was my sophomore junior year of college. There have been discussions in my classes about this that I wanted to share with you guys. I've been thinking about this for almost 3 years now, and there are so many things I want to talk about, and I very much want this to be a discussion, so feel free to leave all of your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. I'm also afraid I'm going to have questions that will not be able to be answered just due to the information that is publicly available. However, if you do see something that I'm not considering, or some piece of information available that I have not stumbled upon, please share it with the class. A lot of the ways I look at topics like this is straight from this book, All You Need to Know About the Music Business by Donald Passman. I'm pretty sure they've updated the edition by now, but this is the one that I had for my music business class. I highly recommend this book if you're wanting to learn anything about the music industry and deeper understand conflicts like this, or how record deals, contracts, or negotiations work in this field. So as we all know, when Taylor was 15, she signed a contract with Big Machine label group for 6 albums, which is kind of a lot, I think. We never got the exact terms, but I'm assuming he signed her for 1 or 2 albums with options of more, meaning guaranteed 1 or 2 albums unless they flop, then the label can terminate the contract. But in the case the artist is successful, like Taylor, the label can then require the maximum amount of options in the contract, in this case 6. This is much less common these days, I've read, since artists are now much more able to go independent and record labels' power is diminishing. Scott Borchetta wasn't even really a label yet. He was leaving Universal Music, but told Taylor he would introduce her to those executives at Universal if she wanted to pursue their label, but he wanted to start his own, and he told her that if she wanted to go with him, she pretty much had a deal immediately. We need to think about the fact that this is a girl who was previously stuck in a development deal with RCA Records, who did not want to fully sign her to a complete record deal because she was too young, and they basically didn't believe in her. There were also opportunities she could have taken where executives were telling her they wanted her to sing other people's songs, but she really wanted to write her own songs. We're going to be discussing Taylor's very long history of being underestimated several times in this video. One of those times was discussed in one of my classes, actually. I was taking a songwriting class taught by a songwriter who has written for very successful artists like Carrie Underwood, and he said a colleague of his wrote with Taylor, and Taylor enjoyed the experience so much that she requested that they write together every other Thursday, and he rejected her request, okay? The girl's got a very long list of music industry professionals behind her who are just full of regret for not taking her more seriously, but I think Taylor has a very strong intuition. She left RCA Records because she knew they didn't believe in her. She figured they never would. She wanted to write her own songs as well. Like I said, she actually told the Daily Telegraph in 2009, "I genuinely felt that I was running out of time. I wanted to capture these years of my life on an album while they still represented what I was going through." She met Scott, who was finally someone who believed in her and was willing to give her this opportunity when she felt she was running out of time to be singing about these relatable high school things. Of course, she's going to jump at the chance of the one person who is finally willing to take her seriously and let her make the music she wanted to make. This is something we also need to keep in mind. Taylor was pretty much giving herself a time limit. It's ridiculous that she was feeling too old at 15, but that's how it was. The girl had albums about high school she wanted to write, and no one would give her a chance as graduation is creeping up on her. So the moral of the story that people seem to have extracted from this feud is that Taylor should not have signed the contract with Big Machine. I think she herself has also kind of alluded to feeling this way in the statements that she's made, but all the information that I'm finding from that time pretty much is pointing to the idea that she likely would not have gotten another chance at a deal she was happy with that allowed her to write her own songs for quite some time. What I'm wondering is what everyone expects her to have done instead. And I've thought about this so much, you guys. 2005 was a completely different time. Hardly anyone was going so independent that they didn't even have a deal with an independent label. There was no opportunity of gaining some bargaining power through a online following, other than the little bit she had on MySpace. But again, no label believed that was a force to be reckoned with at this time. All they cared about was album sales. They didn't care about any kind of online audience. Home studios were not at all what they are today. There was no TikTok where somebody's song can just blow up without a record label's marketing team promoting it, unless you had connections or were a child of nepotism. Still pretty true today. I don't think it was all that tempting to walk away from someone who was finally willing to give you a chance just because you don't yet have the bargaining power to negotiate some of the terms away. And this is not me underestimating Taylor. This is me refusing to overestimate the higher ups in this industry, especially at that time. They were the gatekeepers back in the day. Taylor has insane amounts of talent. I actually saw a comment on a Scott Borchetta interview I watched today that was basically like, Taylor should have walked away. Her talent would have found her fame no matter what. Honestly, I disagree. I don't think a male-dominated industry just allows talented women to take the reins with full control. Are we forgetting the hoops this woman had to jump through? Her journey has never come easily. Also, the argument could be made that Scott wasn't even a major label or even like a label yet at all. At the time Taylor signed her contract, maybe because they both were small and just starting out, she lives with regret now and not giving it a solid attempt at requesting ownership of her masters or even having a lawyer look over it and make her aware that that was something she could ask for. As I said, that had never really been allowed before, but because it wasn't really a label yet, maybe Scott would have been so desperate to sign her that he would have just handed those rights to her. Some people think he was always sleazy though, and in that case, he would have declined and she would have just been right back to square one, or maybe he would have given her her masters in exchange for not investing as much into artist development or giving her as much marketing support, which would not be good either. Then she would have the control that she wanted, but much less promotion, not as good studios for recording, possibly. Those albums might not have had the funds to be what those albums ended up being. With no leverage, there's no way an unknown artist can just request something like that without sacrificing something else. However, she did say in her open letter on Tumblr that she funded all of her own music videos from the start, and Scott never refuted those claims, so that seems scammy. There better have been something else that she got in exchange for not using Big Machine's money for those videos, because it sure as hell wasn't her masters. I just hope she forgives herself for what she signed, because unfortunately I do think it was a necessary evil. She very much was running out of time if she wanted to have a Grammy by age 18. She may not have gotten another opportunity until her 20s, and we would not have had those first 3 albums which were just packed with teenage naivety, which literally defined early Taylor as an artist, I would say. Unless she really just wishes she would have begun her career later in the hopes of owning her masters, but it seems, based on everything I've read, she was very set on the idea of putting out her first album while she was in early high school. I just don't see another way she was going to do that. What was she going to do? Go back to RCA Records and their development deal and just hope they eventually take her seriously? While labels now have much less power than they did at the time Taylor was signing her contract, I don't think we should really be discouraging or especially shaming the individual artist signing with labels who request ownership of that artist's masters. This is a very nuanced scenario to consider. I mean, look where this early in life contract got Taylor. Do not confuse this statement with me saying look where Scott got Taylor, because that is false. I'm basically saying look where this early opportunity got Taylor. Scott was but a vessel of opportunity. Starting so young without hesitation is what made her successful, I think. Everyone loves a child prodigy. People love an ingenue. Taylor literally said it herself. I'm glad she didn't wait, and it seems like 15-year-old Taylor also really didn't want to wait now that she could finally write for herself. Our goal should not be to deter artists from signing potentially very successful deals that could catapult them into fame at the risk of having to re-record their masters like Taylor's doing, or having to shell out some money after the contract is over to buy them back. They should be aware aware of this risk, and of course, as a whole, we do want ownership of an artist's masters to stop being the standard, and requesting young unknown artists to kind of be the face of this by withholding signing anything might be a fast way to do it, even if this may harm an individual artist's career if they don't have the funds or the resources to go independent. But I think the lesson we should be extracting from this is definitely education and awareness. For example, any young unknown artist being offered a record deal should 100% look over their entire contract, have a lawyer take a look at it, take into consideration anything they might want changed, such as ownership of the masters, and make a request to have that changed. However, I still don't think we're at that point where that is going to go over too well for someone with absolutely no bargaining power and no other offers for that label to compete with, especially without sacrificing something, as I said before, sufficient marketing or development. But at least they'll know they tried, that they did what they could. In that case, if they still really want to, whether that's because they aren't writing their own songs and don't care a whole lot, or they, like Taylor, feel they just really need to get their work out there while they're young and they do have this opportunity, I think they should sign it. I would sign it. I think this whole new artists need to stop standing for this movement should definitely be applying to the Olivia Rodrigos of this world. Olivia Rodrigo was able to negotiate her way into owning her masters with her record label. This is wonderful for her and for setting a precedent. However, I've seen a lot of people comparing Taylor's early career to Olivia's and assuming that Taylor could have done this too if she'd have just known what to look for, known what to ask for, and I think that's unfair. Nobody is taking into consideration how successful Olivia was before she signed her deal. This is about way more than just talent and a simple request. Olivia was on Disney. She had several successful songs with Disney, a massive amount of followers online at a time when record labels are taking online audiences seriously. Likely there were several labels that were battling for her to sign with them. If this particular label said she couldn't own her masters with them, it was smarter for her to walk. She'd be able to sign a different deal the very next day. If she has a good lawyer, I bet that girl has so much control over her work. Taylor educating artists to look out for who owns the masters in their contract is definitely something that's mostly going to help the artists that are already a little bit bigger and have bargaining power, and maybe the unknown artists of today do have a higher chance of success after walking away from a deal than Taylor would have, because their music could potentially blow up online, like on TikTok, or they could like make their own recordings at home. This all thankfully does put a little more power back in artists' hands. Times are changing, but I think we still have work to do before this is a common request just anybody can make. And since times are changing, I do remain optimistic that if enough larger artists like Olivia are aware of the need to request ownership of their masters in their first contract, labels will lose even more power, and then this will become a normalized thing for even the completely unknown artists with no bargaining power to succeed when asking for this. I think it will start to trickle down, or maybe one day the label owning the rights to the masters won't even be something that is showing up in contracts. I try to remain optimistic. I think people have very quickly jumped on the Scott Borchetta was always sleazy train, and I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong opinion here, because we're never going to know him personally or what conversations went down during Taylor's 6-album contract. This is just my opinion. Feel free to share your own in the comments. He did do a lot to kickstart her early career. As I've mentioned before, Taylor was constantly being underestimated, and he was the only person who believed in her in this industry, and I think that's what makes this betrayal so awful. His wife made all the dresses she wore to red carpet events, the Teardrops on My Guitar music video dress, the Love Story dress, this iconic purple thing. This was a resource that Taylor would not have had otherwise that really contributed to that fairy tale look she had in the beginning. In an industry where your image and standing out is so important, especially as a woman, unfortunately, we could argue all day whether he was always secretly awful and only believed in her because he was thinking like, oh, all these other labels are dumb, like this girl's gonna be a star, she's gonna make me so much money. Or did the fame and money change him? Personally, I think it was the fame and money that changed him, and I think Taylor eventually realized that she did not own her masters, and she started making requests to own them at some point. We're not sure exactly when this was. I'm assuming kind of maybe around the 1989 or Reputation eras when she knew the contract was almost over and she could renegotiate or try to buy them. Since she knew it was a contract she did sign, she's even said herself this is something she has made peace with. It's not really Scott's fault that she didn't read what she was signing or didn't get a lawyer to help her understand it. Where I think it all really went wrong was when Scott sold her masters to her worst enemy, and I think that was her main motivation behind re-recording. I don't think she would have done it, or at least not as soon, if it wasn't Scooter who bought them. But as soon as this betrayal happened and she realized that Scooter would be the one profiting off of them, I think she was like, oh hell no, this is not happening on my watch. Maybe if not for Scooter, she would have tried to buy them off whoever purchased them, not caring if that was going to be something that took longer. But now she's maybe thinking these will be mine and not Scooter's as soon as humanly possible. Also, I'd like to discuss the public's changing perception of Scott's suggestion to change her third album title from Enchanted to Speak Now due to her songs not seeming to be about fairy tales anymore. I remember back when that piece of information first came out, everyone was like, oh my god, that was such a great idea. I'm so glad she went with Speak Now and we got such a great album preface out of that. The whole I think you should speak now thing that was happening on tour. Now some fans are so mad about that suggested change that Scott influenced that they're requesting that Taylor re-record Speak Now and title it Enchanted Taylor's version. Yeah, so when someone goes to search up the Speak Now album, the stolen version is the only one that comes up in search. That sounds like a great idea. I feel like so many things I see online that I've wanted to talk about today are just incredibly misguided, I guess. I don't think she's going to change it to Enchanted. That would be such a bad decision. Any casual listener who wants to listen to the album is not going to find her version. Like, I don't know, everything's online and I'm like, do people even think about these things? Another thing I want to talk about involving Scott is the interview that I mentioned earlier. It was an interview where he was talking about signing Taylor. One thing I'll give to the he was always awful and we just didn't see it believers is that in this interview, he seems very partial to the fact that Taylor was so independent in making her dreams come true, that she was the one always calling him, not a parent, not a manager. She was always the one in meetings, not a parent, not a manager. At first, it sounded like a testament to how involved Taylor wanted to be in her career and how much this was not a stage mom driven sort of scenario. But knowing what we know now, that's a red flag. That's the red flag of someone who sounds like they want to get a 15-year-old alone so they can influence what they sign. Of course, the other side of that is that Taylor was a minor, so her parents had to sign the contract too at some point. It's like there is only so much he can influence her to sign a contract that she's not versed in when she is a minor. I don't know. That's definitely something to think about. This was definitely a very convincing child who got her whole family to move to Nashville for her from Pennsylvania, so if he got into her head this was something she really needed to do for her career, I could see her being able to convince her parents to then sign it too, maybe. But it's like, why didn't they get a lawyer? Why didn't they read the contract? That songwriting professor I mentioned earlier also gave his input on this in saying that he is a huge Taylor Swift fan and he does not condone what Scott did. But his take was that she misled her fans into thinking she did not know what was in the contract. I do agree a lot of people misconstrued what she said. As mentioned, the things I see online are so ridiculous. It's a contract, you have to read it. I don't think that was really her intention to frame it like that though. That just seems like an obvious thing her fans should realize. To me, her complaint was more him selling it to her worst enemy. Scotty. Yeah, it was legal, but it was still shitty. Probably the same reason she didn't back when she signed with Big Machine. It takes a village, a whole team of people to run the empire that is Taylor Swift. So much goes into making records, such as working with distribution companies, merchandising, marketing teams. Taylor cannot do all of that herself. Of course, she could be the one leading the charge and hiring up various teams to do all of that for her, but it is so much more efficient to have a label taking care of that for you. I think Taylor makes great business decisions. However, I think if she were making all of the decisions, she would not have time to write as much as she does. She's only one person and labels find you collaborators, songwriters, producers, musicians, other people to work with, as well as having already established relationships with distributors, merchandisers, promoters. They have connections and relationships that one person, no matter how successful, just never will. Another reason I think she went with a label again this time around is because she now has bargaining power. She can ask for pretty much anything she wants. She knows this. Everyone knows this. Scott should know this. That's another reason I think fame and money changed him and made him greedy. He really had the audacity to offer her an earn back deal where she earns back one album for every new one that she turns in that he then owns the masters to again. So it's never even equal. That's the worst scam in the history of scams. She's Taylor Swift. Why would he propose that? Again, more men in this industry underestimating her still to this day. I just don't understand what he was thinking. Maybe he was really banking on the possibility of her being too attached to the familiarity popularity of his label? That's just another question I have that I don't think I'm ever gonna know the answer to. Why did you think that was a good idea, Scott? I've tried to put myself in his shoes so many times and I just can't figure out why he thought that would work. Another reason I think she signed with UMG is because she has a big heart, especially for other artists, as well as the aforementioned big bargaining power. Something we don't talk about enough as Swifties is the fact that her new contract with UMG requires that Universal must hand over to their artists on a non-recoupable basis a portion of any money they get from selling their Spotify shares. Non-recoupable basically means that the money they pay an artist cannot be put towards the debt the artist is in with the label. An artist can become in debt with a label when the label has given that artist advances that the artist's music has not become successful enough to pay back yet. But yeah, that request is pretty big and uncommon. Taylor now has bargaining power. They grew up so fast. Labels need to turn a profit, and this may be an unpopular opinion among Swifties, but I believe they should be turning a profit and not just recovering their losses invested into the artist. Otherwise, they'd be put out of business. If a label wouldn't be making a profit, they wouldn't be able to pay their employees who are just trying to pay rent. There are whole teams full of people who are working to ensure an artist's success, and they deserve to be paid. But this isn't a super applicable conversation right now since leverage is still so skewed in favor of the label, and I can never really see it skewing the other way, but I do think it's on the road to being balanced. There should be a way for the artists to maintain control over what happens with their masters, and the only other people profiting off of them are the people who worked to provide the resources needed to ensure that music's success. And if the music happens to be incredibly successful, I think the label and the people working behind it should share in those increased profits. But I think that should be as far as it goes. The artist should ultimately have the final say in what happens to the work itself and it not falling into enemies' hands who had literally nothing to do with that work, who did not help get it off the ground, and then that person ends up making money off of it. Like, that is just not correct in so many ways. UMG, for example, should and does profit off of Taylor's work. In exchange, Taylor does not have to worry at all about the artist's distribution, marketing, publishing, merchandise. Maybe she should be a little bit more involved with merchandise, but that's for another video. I'm sure they have a budget they give her for her music videos too, and she just ends up not wasting time with that side of things when she could be creating art. She deserves a lot of credit for her success, but to keep her whole empire running, she needs an army, a whole team of people who she has good working relationships with that work for her just as much as she works for them. In conclusion, labels should be better. Artists should have way more control and input. Even though labels owning master recordings is very common, it's especially gross that this is happening to Taylor because of how much of an emotional investment she has in her work. She sings, writes, produces even. She has such a hand in the creation of her work. If anybody deserves to own their master recordings, it's definitely Taylor Swift. There's an interview I watched with Jack Antonoff where he was discussing the US being a country that doesn't appreciate art, so much so that our cultural perception of artists is that they're just so lucky to even be here that they end up getting screwed over and underpaid. A lot of labels are awful. I hate that this big machine feud has kind of given the public this one idea of what a label is like as this horrible and controlling thing when there's gotta be good ones out there. I have to believe that there are good ones out there. They deserve to have a slice of the pie when there are people working full time to make sure an artist succeeds and funding their music videos and studio fees and providing them with connections to producers and musicians and writers and collaborators. That good relationship and bargaining power should not be reserved for the top artists with clout or the Taylor Swifts of this world who had to almost serve their time in order to have any kind of leverage for their next contract. So that is all for today's video. Read your legal documents, kids. That goes for all of them. Contracts, leases, brand deals, anything you sign. This does not apply to just artists and record deals. I get 20-page contracts for the most simple sponsorships and I'm printing them out, highlighting, taking notes, underlining. If I don't understand something, I'm Googling, is there fine print? I'm pulling out my magnifying glass. That's why they call it fine print, because I'm gonna find it. We all need to learn from this, especially as young people. If I forgot anything, I'll leave it in a pinned comment. I'll also leave some interesting articles about this down in the description. If you want to look at every angle of this like I did, let me know if you enjoyed and give it a thumbs up if you did. I would love to hear your comments and thoughts down below. If you want to follow me on my Instagram, it is right here. And if you want to follow me on my TikTok, that is right here. I will see you all next week for another video, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye, guys.